Before we get into today's show, let me tell you about the latest deal from Mike Lindell, MyPillow. Once again, the big box stores have canceled their orders simply because they don't agree with Mike Lindell's politics. They don't like it because he supports President Trump. Well, he's going to pass that savings on to you. No more middleman. And boy, does he have some great deals on the Giza Dream Sheets and the Percal bed sheets. Listen to this. Giza Dream queen size, normally $139.98. Your wholesale price, $69.99 when you use promo code Joey. King size only $79.99. The Percal queen size normally $89.98. Your wholesale price $29.98 when you use promo code Joey. Just call 1-800-893-4059 or go to mypillow.com. Always use promo code Joey. Free shipping options available. This allotment's not going to last very long. When they're gone, they're gone. mypillow.com. Promo code Joey. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. President Donald Trump is set to deliver his State of the Union address tonight, and there's a particular guest who is stealing the headlines. You're going to want to stick around to hear about this one. The Trump administration is escalating pressure on Senate Democrats as negotiations to end the partial government shutdown remain at a standstill as lawmakers return to Capitol Hill this week to try and agree on funding to reopen the government. And Governor Gavin Newsom told CNN's Dana Bash that Democrats will need to be more, quote, culturally normal on issues like transgender athletes and women's sports if they want to win future voters. And the South Carolina House of Representatives are taking another shot at closing party primaries in the Palmetto State. Representative Mike Burns joins us to talk about his new bill that was recently introduced. There's a lot to cover today. We will jump right in.
I told you we'd be back.
And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
It's Joey Hudson.
I wanted to name it the Joey Hudson bill, but, they don't allow you to put names on bills. But I wanted to call it the Joey Hudson bill because I know that one's been near and dear to you for a number of years.
That's how it's done. Let your voice be heard.
And the truth shall set you free.
Here's Joey Hudson.
So Congress is trying to make it back to the U.S. Capitol this week. Mother Nature is not helping with the nor'easter that blew through the area that has affected a lot of travel. Top of the list when they return is funding to the remaining part of the budget and getting the government open again. Now, we are in week 2 of this partial government shutdown. Not the whole government, just a particular part of the government, as you know. It's not Social Security, not the Pentagon, not the IRS, just one department, the Department of Homeland Security. And if you think that's not a big deal, well, just think again, because DHS isn't some obscure agency tucked away in a federal building in D.C. DHS oversees TSA, Customs and Border Protection, ICE, FEMA, airport screening, border security, disaster response, and the list goes on. This is the front line of national security. And right now, it's operating without full funding. Now, so far, the impacts have been described as minimal. That's the word being used, minimal. But the warning signs are starting to flash. Over the weekend, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announced the department is activating what they're calling emergency measures. Let me translate that for you. They're moving people around. They're tweaking operations. They're stretching resources. And that's when things start to get real. Let's start at the airport. TSA PreCheck, used by more than 20 million Americans, will remain operational for now. That's the good news, but staffing constraints are growing. Look, if you travel, you probably know how convenient TSA PreCheck is. And that's one of the things that the Democrats, they'd love to see it closed down to make it inconvenient for travelers so that they'll make a lot more noise to their representatives back home. But here's one that got Chucky Schumer's attention and Nancy Pelosi and all the rest of them. Courtesy escorts for members of Congress are suspended. And if this continues, we're going to see longer lines, slower screening, potential delays for everybody. But that courtesy escorts for members of Congress, you remember the big to-do that Nancy Mace made a while back because her courtesy escort didn't pick her up at the right place at Charleston Airport? Evidently, members of Congress, they get a little bit different treatment than you and I would. They have someone who meets them at the airport curb, walks them through security, and gets them to their gate. And that could be in limbo. That'll get their attention. Now, let's go back. Remember the historic 43-day shutdown a few years back? TSA agents went without paychecks. Some called in sick. Others couldn't afford child care or gas to get to work. Wait times ballooned. Flights were delayed. Airports were chaotic. And that's when Washington finally felt the heat. That's when it got their attention. And here's the political truth about this. Some Republicans believe it may take that kind of disruption again to break this stalemate. Florida Senator Rick Scott did not mince words. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, nothing will change until flights start getting shut down. When TSA workers stop showing up when Democrats can't fly, that's when it'll get their attention. It's a blunt assessment, but it's a true assessment. It reflects the frustration on the Republican side, because here's where the standoff sits right now. Senate Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, are demanding stricter reforms to immigration and customs enforcement, ICE. That's their sticking point. They want tighter rules on how ICE operates. They want judicial warrant requirements. They want the unmasking of agents. They want structural reforms. And Republicans are saying not going to happen. The White House has been willing to entertain some proposals, but GOP leadership has drawn clear red lines. So here we are sitting, waiting. And while Washington debates, DHS employees go without pay. And let's talk about the human side for just a minute. These are TSA officers in Greenville, Spartanburg, in Charlotte, Atlanta. These are Border Patrol agents in Texas and Arizona. These are FEMA personnel responding to disasters in which the Northeast has had a snow episode these last few days. I got a feeling FEMA is going to be needed in some of those areas. They're being told, keep working. You're essential. But we're not going to pay you yet. And if you've ever tried to explain to your family why the paycheck isn't coming, why you're getting up and getting dressed and going to work every day, but you're having to really cut back because you're not getting paid, Secretary Nome said it plainly. Shutdowns have real-world consequences, not political consequences, real-world consequences to these families that are being directly affected. Customs and Border Protection has halted global entry at airports. Agents are being diverted to process travelers. If you're someone who travels internationally for business, that's going to get your attention. That's going to matter. FEMA has paused public assistance for ongoing disasters. Non-emergency work, stopped. Non-disaster related activities, halted. Travel restricted to life safety missions only. So in hurricane season, in wildfire season, in flood season, we're scaling back disaster infrastructure because Washington can't reach an agreement. And again, I suspect FEMA may be needed in some areas that were hit by this winter storm this past weekend, and still in the middle of it, by the way. Democrats argue that they're trying to rein in ICE after the controversial operations and the violent incidents tied to enforcement in Minneapolis and some other areas, but primarily in Minneapolis. That's when it went to a flashpoint. Republicans argue DHS funding shouldn't be held hostage to ideological fights over immigration policy, and they're right. We should be making new guidelines and new practices, new policy for an agency just over a budget fight. And then you got the people who are getting caught in the middle. Air travelers, border communities, disaster victims, federal workers. A shutdown limited to one department might sound small, but DHS is uniquely positioned. Chuck Schumer recognizes that. The Democrats recognize that because it does touch the airports, the ports, the borders, cybersecurity, counterterrorism, disaster response. It's not just a paperwork agency. It's security infrastructure. And when you start trimming security infrastructure, even temporarily, you create some vulnerabilities. You have fewer agents, longer lines, slower processing, delayed reimbursement, paused disaster aid. The list goes on. The longer this drags on, the more those cracks widen. And here's the political irony. Both sides claim they're protecting Americans. Democrats say they're protecting civil liberties. Republicans say they're protecting national security. But while the messaging wars rage, DHS employees are the ones carrying the burden. So what happens next? Historically, shutdown pressures build in waves. Week 1, headlines. Week 2, inconvenience. Week 3, disruption. That's where we're about to head. Week 4, crisis. If TSA lines spike and flights begin stacking up, if FEMA can't reimburse communities, if border processing slows down dramatically, we're going to get some people's attention. That's when public patience wears thin. And here's something else worth noting. The vast majority of DHS is unfunded right now, except certain immigration enforcement accounts that were funded through previous legislation. So ICE operations aren't being stopped right yet. It's the broader operational support around them that's feeling the squeeze, which raises another uncomfortable question. If this shutdown actually achieving the leverage Democrats want, or is it simply creating collateral damage and hurting the very workers that we depend on a day-to-day basis? Love to get your comments. Text me, email me, joe@joeyhudson.com. Joey Hudson here. You tried keto, paleo, Weight Watchers, intermittent fasting. You lose weight, then it comes right back. You blame yourself, your willpower, your discipline. But here's the truth. It was never about willpower. There's one thing that determines whether your body burns fat or stores it. And if you don't fix that first, every diet will fail. At PhD Weight Loss, they identify that one thing and they build a plan that works with your body, not against it. And if you call now, you're going to get 2 weeks free in the program, and they'll pay for your food so you can finally see real answers without more trial and error. If you've done the yo-yo dieting and want clarity, call PhD Weight Loss now and mention Joey Hudson. No more guessing, just answers. Call 864-644-1900. That's 864-644-1900. Say Joey Hudson. That's 864-644-1900. Also find them online at myphdweightloss.com. That's myphdweightloss.com. Do it once and for all. Lose the weight the right way by calling PhD Weight Loss today. So tonight, President Trump delivers his State of the Union speech. There'll be lots of guests in the balcony, but probably not receiving the attention of one particular guest. Here's the story. Florida Congressman Randy Fine is heading to the State of the Union tonight, and he's bringing a guest designed to make a point. Actually, two guests. His father, Alan Fine, and his father's seeing eye dog, Sadie. Now, on its face, it sounds wholesome. Proud father watching his son serve in Congress, a service animal that provides independence and dignity. But this isn't just a family moment. It's a time to make a political statement intentionally, and good for him. Because just days ago, Representative Fine set off a political firestorm with a post on X responding to a comment from a Palestinian Muslim activist about dogs being, quote, unclean as indoor pets. Here's what Representative Fine wrote. If they force us to choose, the choice between dogs and Muslims is not a difficult one. That line exploded. Democrats called it racist, bigoted, Islamophobic. Some called for censure. Others went further, suggesting he should be removed from Congress. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said House Democrats would not let what he called racist and bigoted behavior go unchecked. And that's where this story pivots, because Fine isn't apologizing. He's escalating. He's introducing what he's calling the Protecting Puppies from Sharia Act. He's doubling down rhetorically, and now at the State of the Union, he's bringing a visual statement. His father, seeing eye dog, will reportedly be wearing a shirt that reads, "Don't tread on me." Have you seen some of the photos circulating on social media of this cute little dog? That slogan, of course, traces back to the Gadsden flag, Revolutionary War imagery, liberty symbolism, limited government philosophy. So what's the message here? Fine says it's about defending American values. He says it's about protecting Americans' rights, including the right to own dogs, against what he frames as cultural or religious pressure. He also says the outrage over his post is selective. He points to controversies involving Democrat members of Congress, referencing allegations involving Delegate Stacey Plaskett and Representative Sheila McCormick, arguing that critics are quick to condemn him but quiet elsewhere. Now, let's separate a few things out here. First, service dogs. For millions of Americans, they're not political symbols, they're lifelines. Sadie allows Alan Fine, his dad, to live independently, to navigate the world, to travel to Washington, to sit in the House gallery, to watch his son serve in Congress. That's real. That's family. That's a proud moment. Second, though, is rhetoric. The language used in that original X post was intentionally provocative. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't nuanced. It was designed to trigger reaction, and reaction he got. Third, politics in prime time. The State of the Union is always symbolic. Members bring guests to highlight causes. We've seen it over and over throughout the years. Gold Star families, small business owners, crime victims, activists. I don't care what party you're in, having guests in that gallery to be seen, that's bipartisan. Fine is choosing to highlight his family and make a broader cultural point. Now, here's the bigger question for the country. Are we in a place politically where every provocative statement must escalate into a full-blown expulsion fight? The Democrats seem to think so, I guess. Or are we in a place where rhetoric has become so sharpened that shock value is the strategy? Because this wasn't a policy debate about immigration law or counterterrorism. It was a social media exchange amplified into a congressional flashpoint. The activist at the center of the original comment, Nurdeen Kiswani, later said her remarks about dogs being unclean was meant as a joke and described Fine's response as genocidal. Oh, so now she was just joking, huh? That word genocidal tells you just how quickly, though, rhetoric escalates on both sides. So what happens next? House Democrats are weighing formal action. Republicans are largely standing back, some quietly supportive, others wary of the optics. Fine is leaning into the controversy, though. And tonight, as the president delivers his address, millions are going to be watching. Some will focus on policy, like border security, inflation, national defense. Some will scan the gallery for symbolic guests. And some will look for that dog in a "Don't Tread on Me" shirt. I'll be looking for the dog, as will Jesse and Simon. Here's what's undeniable, though. We are in an era where politics is no longer confined to committee rooms or floor votes. It plays out on social media, and it can happen quick. It plays out in symbolism, plays out in prime time. And it's a part of the 24/7 cycle, news cycle. Lawmakers know it. For Representative Fine, this moment is about drawing a cultural line. For his critics, it's about drawing a moral one, if you will. And for the rest of the country, well, it's another example of how quickly our national conversation can pivot from policy to back and forth social media posts. Now, as conservatives, many would argue the core issue here isn't dogs or religion. It's about freedom of speech. It's whether an elected official can use blunt, even offensive rhetoric without facing removal. Others would argue elected officials have a higher standard, that words carry weight far beyond a private citizen's post. That's the tension, and it's not going away. So tonight, while the president outlines his agenda, there'll also be a quiet subplot playing out in the gallery. And it's a classic. A father, a son, a service dog, a slogan. And a country will still wrestling with how far is too far in political speech. The Democrats don't seem to have any limit, so why should the Republicans? We'll see whether this moment cools the temperature or actually pours gasoline on it. We're going to see how much attention Sadie gets in the gallery. Because if the past few years have taught us anything, it's that in Washington, symbolism is never accidental. And controversy rarely ends at one tweet. This will have a life of its own, I can bet you. California Governor Gavin Newsom, widely viewed as a potential 2028 presidential contender, he sat down with Dana Bash on CNN and said something that's raising eyebrows across the political spectrum, especially within the Democrat Party base. He said Democrats need to be, in his words, more culturally normal. He evidently doesn't realize just how far out his party has become. Here's what he said.
The prism of purely politics. There's no doubt that the Democratic Party needs to be, dare I say, more culturally normal. I believe that. Less prone to spending disproportionate amount of time on pronouns, identity, politics. More focused on tabletop issues, things that really matter, the stacking of stress in terms of electricity bills and child care costs and health care and obviously housing costs, and how easily we get trapped in that, how I've fallen prey to that. I mean, here I was, way out front on marriage equality, so I understand this from both on the receiving end of this and on the front end of this, leading the pack. So I think there has to be some consideration of that. But I think if you can't hold the line on competitive sports, again, sports, there's some nuance in this larger conversation. But competitive medal sports, if we can't find that nuance, I think we're going to lose a lot of people we're not going to get invited into a larger conversation.
Well, now, interesting, huh? Wonder when he had that revelation that most of Americans don't believe that little boys who think they're little girls should get to be able to play in girls' sports. The interesting thing here, this wasn't a Republican saying this. Wasn't conservative commentators. A Democrat governor of California saying that his party needs to be more culturally normal. I can't argue with him. But he didn't stop there. He said the party needs to spend less time on pronouns and identity politics and more time on what he called the tabletop issues: the electric bills, child care costs, health care, housing. In other words, the things that affect everyday Americans. Now, if you follow politics over the past 5 years or so, you know exactly why this matters. The transgender athlete debate, particularly biological males competing in women's sports, has become one of the most potent cultural flashpoints in our country's history. Poll after poll shows a majority of Americans, including most Democrats, are uncomfortable with male-bodied athletes competing in female competitive medal sports. Newsom acknowledged that against the more outlandish, absurd part of his party, the more activist side of his party. He said if Democrats can't find nuance on competitive sports, they're going to lose people. Yes, not just lose elections. They're going to lose a chance to even be part of the larger conversation. Now, here's the part that really stands out. Last year, in a conversation with conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, you remember this? Newsom admitted that biological males competing in female sports is, quote, deeply unfair. And this week, he appears to be doubling down. He said, I said that. I believe that. And he's telling his party, hey, folks, we got to get off of this train before it wrecks, before it derails. Now, that's not accidental. It's not him just suddenly waking up one day and realizing, well, my party's wrong on this. Notice how carefully he threads the needle, though. He insists he remains a staunch advocate for the transgender community. He points out he has signed more pro-trans legislation than any other governor. He talks about having a trans godson. He says his position comes from the heart. And I'm okay with that. Look, if he has family members who are trans, doesn't mean he turns his back on them. He just doesn't expect the rest of the world to treat it as normal. What he's trying to do is separate sports from identity, separate competitive fairness from civil rights, and politically, that's an interesting story that's an interesting needle to try to thread. Because for years, Democrats largely treated the issue as untouchable, framing any skepticism as bigotry. Now, one of the most ambitious Democrats in America is saying, we may need to rethink how we talk about this. He's not saying abandon it, but talk about it differently. Why? Because of elections. Because, let's be candid, in swing states, suburban districts, working class districts, this issue has moved voters. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the whole Democrat National Committee, when they were trying to keep Donald Trump from going back to the White House, learned this firsthand. Republicans have leaned into it very hard. Democrats have struggled to articulate a position that feels both compassionate and competitive, and like they're not turning their back on a part of their party. So when Governor Newsom says Democrats need to be more culturally normal, he's really saying we've drifted away from where most Americans are. And that's a pretty big admission, I think. He's coming clean. Now, I don't know, again, if this is just a revelation to him or if he's known this all along. He's just been afraid to speak up until now it could potentially hurt him, hurt his chances of a national office. There's also a strategic layer here. Newsom's not just governor of California. He views himself as not only a national leader, he likes to think of himself as a world leader. That's why he was in Davos, just a few weeks ago, even though he made a complete idiot of himself. 2028 is not that far away. These guys are starting to position for that. So when he says Democrats need to focus less on pronouns and more on utility bills, he's talking to voters in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, maybe even in the Carolinas, not just San Francisco and Los Angeles and some of those crazy areas in his home state. He's already facing backlash from parts of his own party. So he's going to have to walk this wire pretty cautiously. Activists who view any concession on transgender participation in women's sports, they're going to go after him with a vengeance. They're going to view it as betrayal. And they're very active within the Democrat Party. Move too forward toward the center, you risk alienating the activist base. You stay rigid, you risk losing the general electorate. Newsom appears to be betting that nuance wins, that he's got to get more to the center, be more normal if he's ever going to get the nomination and have a chance. He even admitted something else that's politically fascinating. He said 80% of people listening disagree with his position. Think about that. He's acknowledging that the national mood on this issue isn't where progressive activists might want it to be. This isn't just about sports, though. It's about whether Democrats believe cultural issues have cost them ground, maybe cost them elections. And the answer to that, you and I know, is yes. It's about whether identity politics has overshadowed economic anxiety, our worries about inflation, about the cost of living, about housing, about those electricity bills. It's about whether the average voter struggling with inflation, child care, health care, feels like they're being heard on the more important topics than a little boy wanting to play in girls' sports. Gavin Newsom is smart enough to recognize that. Your comments are welcome on the Furman Ford text line, 864-477-JOEY. That's 864-477-5639. Emails always welcome, joey@joeyhudson.com. Speaking of the Furman Ford text line, it's never been more important to support locally run businesses owned by people who actually live here in the upstate. Let me take a minute to talk with you about our friends at Furman Ford. If you're looking for a new vehicle, maybe a great pre-owned vehicle, one you can trust, or maybe you're looking to order that special vehicle. Either way, if you want a new one, a brand new one, or a pre-owned that you can trust, the folks at Furman Ford, they're there to help you. Their name is on the sign because their name is on the line, because every single transaction is important to them. Jim Furman, Matthew Furman. They do business the right way. When you stop by, when you give them a call, or maybe when you just send them a quick email, you're always going to have access to a member of the Furman Ford family. And by the way, they also offer great service, and you're not going to have to wait weeks and weeks to get it done. And you do not have had to purchase your vehicle at Furman Ford. Doesn't even have to be a Ford. They service all makes and models. Visit my friends at Furman Ford online at furmanford.com, furmanford.com. This year, we've talked quite a bit about the idea of closing primaries in South Carolina. It's an issue that has been lingering for over a decade or more. We talked back last month to Representative Mike Burns, who is the sponsor of a couple of different bills, and he has sort of fine-tuned, I guess you could say, or I'll let him say. House Bill 5183 is the latest, and Representative Burns, we appreciate you being with us again, and just give us an update on the new bill and what's the difference between it and some of the others that have been considered.
Well, first we filed 3310, and we classified it as the pure bill, which would only let Republicans elect a Republican candidate, a Democrat the same, and there would be no crossover with the other party, or there would be no crossover with an unaffiliated independent. And 5183, the new bill, is exactly the same. The difference in my two bills are there was some cleanup. The first, and it's primarily around the first go-round when you go to the first primary, that you would be able at that time to sign an affidavit and, sign up. First time to be a Republican or to be a Democrat, you would affirm that that's what you're doing. And after you sign that, then you would be able to go ahead and vote. So we wouldn't have any chance of disenfranchising someone, particularly the fear was we'd have some older people like me, who would go to the polls and they wouldn't have pre-registered in the original 60-day cycle that was in 3310. So we changed all that so people wouldn't get disenfranchised at the first go-round, at the first primary. And then you would be in the system and everybody would be required to, if you're new coming into the state, you would have to register at the next primary within a month, 30 days before.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we're trying to clean that part of it up. But the main guts of the bill is exactly like 3310, which, would maintain purity in the process and let people of your own party, a private organization, you would be able to elect those people. And as I said at the hearing, I'll reiterate it again. If we're Burger King and we're wanting to hire a new CEO, elect a new CEO, we only want Burger King board members voting. And what sense would it make to invite Cracker Barrel board members to come and pollute the pool of the one you're trying to hire?
Yeah.
So makes all the sense in the world to most of us. And, the establishment bill that was put forward was a step in the right direction. And I would, if I had to, I would vote for that bill, but it wouldn't be the best bill that could be voted for. And it would keep Democrats from crossing over to Republicans and vice versa. But it would allow the independent, non-affiliated voters to vote in your primary and help you elect a Republican or help you elect a Democrat. And
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, because we've talked a lot about the idea of closing primaries, at Democrats voting in Republican primaries, and I guess to a degree maybe some Republicans voting in Democrat primaries. Is there any evidence that this has been a widespread problem?
Well, I'd answer that two ways. First, I'll answer it right here in Greenville County. December 23rd, we had now State Representative Diane Mitchell barely hang on to a runoff because the Democrats went out in full force all over social media for 2 weeks before the runoff, and they went every way they could go to get Democrats to actually come out and vote for the other guy. And she narrowly won by 20 votes. So it's going on. It's going on right under our doorstep. And if you want to go to the bigger picture, you had a lady out in Tennessee last month, signed up to run for the U.S. Congress, an avid Democrat who told everybody, I'm an avid Democrat. I'm having to run as a Republican, but I am a Democrat and I have the Democratic views, and I'm running as a Republican because this district is a Republican district. Mm-hmm. And she just came out and told me that. And I've kept that little video in my excerpt. And at some point in time, I guess I hope I'll be able to use that in the next hearing, hopefully that we'll get.
Yeah. So, and let's just talk about that because, when you and I talked back in January, one of the things that I liked about, and I think it was 3643. I get the bill numbers confused, but the other version of the bill, because it had some qualifications for candidates there. You would have to have voted in 2 out of the last 3 party primaries before you could run for office. Am I correct though in that is not part of your new bill?
No, it's not. It's not at all. What we think. Everybody's got different opinions, but what we think is the most prudent thing is to let, the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, they're private organizations. They should be able to set those parameters for themselves, and their executive board should be able to do that for each of those parties, is my view. So it's not included in the bill.
Yeah. So you're saying that the party should be able to have those types of qualifications as far as allowing someone to run or not?
Absolutely. You know, they do it for their executive committee already, and they should be able to do whatever they think the right thing is for their party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Representative Mike Burns is my guest today. We're talking about another attempt at closing primaries in South Carolina. So let's talk for a minute. You know, you guys, you had a subcommittee hearing back in January, and if I remember correctly, it wasn't sent out to the full committee, and I forget who it was, but I remember someone saying that there just wasn't the quote appetite to start down this road because of the fear of literally, I think they used the term civil war within the Republican Party. Has something changed? Is there an appetite now?
What's changed is there is no civil war. I mean, that was an overstatement that I disagree with vehemently. You know, you got a Republican Party, you got 82% of the electorate in 2024 when it was on the ballot advocating, voting. 82% of Republicans in South Carolina voted that the primaries needed to be closed. So there's no 50-50 split or no war going on.
Yeah.
The war going on was when the people realized and were told, this is what made everybody mad. The leadership across the state went and supported the competing bill, 3643 or whatever that bill number was. They never made the electorate even aware that there was another bill, which was 3310, which I'd filed for 13 years. They never mentioned the bill or made them aware of it. So they thought that was the only show in town.
Yeah.
So they supported it, and they got upset when they realized they had been not told the whole story.
Yeah.
And so they got upset about that, and they preferred the pure bill. You know, the people that showed up at the State House, as you remember, talking about it, hearing about it, they were, most every one of them was for the pure bill, 3310. They showed up in droves. They had to go to a larger room downstairs to accommodate all the people that testified for 2 hours. The time ran out. Session started, so they couldn't take a vote. But, in a later interview, the leaders of the Judiciary Committee who held these hearings, they're the ones that said the people didn't have an appetite for it. Well, I think 82% of the people wanting the bill, I think that was a misstatement or a misread on their part.
Yep.
And, the truth is they just got into a quandrum and they didn't want to vote on this bill. And they didn't want to pass it forward. They could have if they'd have chosen to. But they chose to sit on it, let the time run out, and then not take a vote, not schedule another meeting. So now we filed another bill, and I guess if we don't get a hearing on it pretty quickly, we'll have to write a demand letter according to the House rules and see if we can force another hearing.
Yep. Well, we'll certainly be watching this, and we hope. We'd love for something to happen here. You want to pull your crystal ball out and make a prediction?
Well, I'm going to tell you, they've been fighting this thing for ever since I've been in office, and this is, this is 13 tries at it, and they pushed us back yet again. But we're making a little progress because we got a half of a hearing.
Yeah.
We never got to a vote, but we did get a half of a hearing in 13 years. So
yeah.
I guess we're making a little progress, and we're not going to give up.
Yep. Well,
One more time, the people voted 82% for closed primaries. It's a misstatement or a misread on somebody's part to say that there's no public interest in doing that.
Yep. Well, it's all I ever hear for sure. My listeners, they text, they email, they call in because they want primaries closed as well. Representative Mike Burns, it's always a pleasure. Appreciate what you're doing here. And, hey, we'll check back in with you hopefully in a few weeks and know that this thing's moving forward.
All right. Thanks a bunch. I appreciate being on your show, and thanks to your listeners.
That's it for today's edition of Just the Truth. Thanks for joining me in the PhD Weight Loss Studios. To lose weight for the last time, visit myphdweightloss.com. If you haven't joined my mailing list yet, visit my website, joeyhudson.com. Click on the Connect with Joey button so that you can receive our emails and the most up-to-date news. Also, join me on my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, comment, and subscribe. Just search for Joey Hudson. As always, thanks for spending a few minutes of your day with me. Do me a favor and forward this episode to a few friends. Just click on the share button and send to your contacts. We need to build an army of conservatives to win our country back, and we can do that by continuing to share the truth with our friends and family. Keep those comments coming via the Furman Ford text line 864-477-JOEY. Email to joey@joeyhudson.com, and I love your messages on the MyPillow message line. Again, that's 864-477-JOEY, 864-477-5639. Be sure and take advantage of the MyPillow special, just $14.88 on the standard MyPillows when you use promo code Joey. Order online at mypillow.com or call 800-893-4053. We're back again tomorrow and hope you'll plan to join us. Until then, remember, God's got this. He's still in control.